So this session is we return to the space of the CTOs to solve yet another interesting, challenging problem that faces us, that we think deeply about, but that we're not experts in. That we take people that have raw talent and skills and experience in industry and bring them together to solve a creative problem that is put before us. And so I am informed that, Mark, you have another challenge for us today. Is that correct?
I have a challenge for you today, that's true.
Okay, so maybe you should lay it on
All
us.
right, and I want to mention this before we begin. I'm taking the place today of Larry Smarr, who, for those of you who attended FiRe last year, saw his wonderful Quantified Self presentation, which led directly to this. And Larry had a death in the family. Everything's, fine, but he asked if he could be relieved today, and he's traveling today to his house. So our hearts are with Larry. So Larry and I we usually chat kind of midwinter about what could be a good CTO challenge question. And after his performance last year, he actually turned to me and said, this year you think of one, because he often is the guy. And I was thinking about him and what he had done. And I was trained in biochemistry when I was at Stanford. And I have spent a lot of time looking at hospitals and medical care and human biology. And I've never understood how it could possibly be that a so-called doctor could so-called treat someone without understanding what they were eating every day, since the entire process biochemically going on in that body was driven by the nutritional story. And doctors are not trained in this. They don't have the information.
Right.
And I started looking at what Larry had done, and it seemed suddenly clear that we had two parts of a three-part story. Larry showed us very clearly what the outputs were. You can get blood pressure, you can get blood tests. Make a list of all the things that he's been tracking for 10 years. And then if you look at as he had done, if you look at the kind of the medical, the human biology side, you can see where is that coming from. There are processes in the body that are making these things happen. There's a reason why you have high blood pressure or why you have these other issues. And so that was very good. You can track the disease or the symptoms back into the human body and say, there's the problem, there's the process. But guess what was missing? Yeah. So the really important part of the story, nobody had attacked yet.
Right.
And even those people who care, I know, Ty, you care, a lot of folks care, you kind of get a bottle of something at the store or a pound of this or that, and it's got some ingredients, and it mostly says fats or no fats, sugar or no sugar. And that's about all you get to learn. You can't build a science on that kind of information, really. Right. So for all the people who care even or deeply about their own health and are trying to eat carefully, and for all the doctors who may be interested in some way or other trying to use nutrition, there just isn't a platform yet.
Right.
So the thought for this year's challenge, we gave you guys easy ones before. All you had to do was fight urban wildfires, in intensely crazy environments, or maybe come up with some way of avoiding a 2 degrees centigrade global warming excursion. Yeah. Easy stuff. So we thought this year that the cool thing to do would be to come up with that third missing piece. We think, Larry and I think, that this is something that would be of huge value to consumers, to people of the world, to the medical profession. Make a list of everybody who benefits, and it's kind of a no-brainer in the sense that it benefits so many different people in so many different sectors. It's there to be done.
Yeah.
The question, of course, is it technically possible to do it, and is there a cost basis that will make this happen? So just to be careful here, I want to read you exactly the challenge that we mailed to the team so that people understand on Friday when you guys show up again. You could fail. Could be the first year when you fail. But assuming you succeed, this will be what you will have succeeded in doing. So there are 6 parts to this challenge. Why make it easy? Number 1, describe the field and its hoped-for benefits. Number 2, how will this information be developed? Number 3, what human or other resources will be needed? Number 4, can we create a technical platform for the discovery and study of this field? And number 5, how can we incorporate your findings into the study of human health, the quantified self, and future medical practice? And number 6, and not the least, how can FiRe participants assist you in this set of tasks? So that's it. That's the challenge this year. I have no concern that you'll be able to take it.
No, it's a great challenge. You know, the sort of early discussions on it, I mean, from a very practical side, was from Larry's discussion that as, you know, kind of really set a very high mark for FiRe, especially not only the natural inquisitive nature of science and technology, but there's a very personal aspect that just kind of washed over everyone at that conference, and it was very personal because he's a personal friend of many individuals here, and he's very candid about situations that he's facing. And as a result, you know, I've also been working to exercise and ride and try to eat right, and everything that we have to learn about the owner's manual, if you will, for the body, or what the nutrition is. What should we be eating that's good for us? Because the information that we were told in, you know, grade school or college or what have you may not be necessarily the most scientifically accurate information of what's the nutrition that we need for our bodies to do what we need to do.
Exactly.
And that the format of how do we surface that information for everyday mom and dads and kids and what have you, to actually encourage the right and inform them in ways that are meaningful to them, that will encourage them to grab the apple instead of the candy bar, that will encourage them to you know, have the fresh fruit, or to make the right choices with regard to, you know, are they going to eat the quinoa, or are they going to eat, you know, the white bread? How to do this and do it in a meaningful, impactful way. Frankly, I think this is one of the toughest challenges because of the nature and in the case of a wildfire, it's a fire or it's not a fire. You know, it's here or it's not. Yeah. In the case of nutrition, there are so many variables into this equation, and how do you surface that? I mean, there's been dialogue amongst the team, just kind of getting their arms around the scope of the problem, and thank you for your guidance in a couple of these things of how to think about this problem. But how do we surface, you had an example of fructose versus glucose, how do you surface those type of things to educate people on what needs to be done? So I don't know if our illustrious team comments on your initial take of what this, I want to kind of open it up. Eric and Sri, you've had comments and stuff initially on this challenge. What are your initial thoughts as this has kind of been put forward to you? Because, you know, obviously we're going to be talking about this in the next couple of days very, very intensely, but just some opening thoughts, perhaps.
I'll start. I didn't look so much at the pure science, but in the first take of it, I am very convinced that part of this needs to be a fashion statement. We've just got to make it cool to do this. And because I think we can put out all kinds of scientific data, but if young people don't think it's cool to be a part of this, it goes nowhere.
Jerry, what are your thoughts as you look at this?
Well, we were doing that round robin of email. I sort of took the Peanuts point of view. I miss Peanuts a lot in the cartoons. And so my view is that we've seen this being held up before. This is cool. All it needs, in my opinion, is a probe that needs to be invented so I can stick it in that stuff I put in my mouth and find out what the hell is in there. And this way, since these are global, how many billions of computers did we hear this represents? Everybody will have one. All you need is that little probe, and as you're right, it has to be fun.
Probing being fun. Which brings us into my bailiwick. But the notion that you just raised, Jerry, is takes us back to our very first CTO challenge, which was inventing the next cell phone. And a lot of people have talked about it since then, that the modular approach that we discussed in our first CTO challenge has not really been followed up. Instead, we have this little mini pad. But clearly, I think this is a trend that was predicted that is going to come true. You're starting to see these add-on features primarily in software and apps, but we're starting to see clip-onable. And I think we're going to see the results of that first CTO challenge actually coming true. And what we're talking about here is going to help propel it, because here is an attachable set of applications that people are going to care about a lot. Now, wearing my other hat as a physicist, I have to mention the continuity equation. And that is the most magical of all equations. And that is what comes in across the 6 faces of a cube has to balance with the change in the amount of what's inside the cube. Now, a physicist tends to model a human being by saying, assume the human being is a cube. Well, it's more complicated, but this is going back to the fundamental of medicine in most human cultures across 9,000 years, at least 6,000. And that is, all they could study was inputs and outputs. So people would become experts at studying feces, they would become experts at studying urine, or they would try to analyze over the years using slaves or just keeping careful records across 1,000 years. If we input this, when the condition here is like this, then this happens. We've gone away from that a bit because we've been analyzing and learning a lot about the human body. But this CTO challenge, I think, brings us back full circle, because what Larry pointed out to us is, yeah, you can know a lot about the box and what's in the box, but knowing what's coming in and analyzing what's coming out may empower the individual. And that's where we get back to these highly cleanable probes.
Yeah, the challenge comes in too is that each body isn't the same either. As we've noticed from the genomics and the other things that we've learned at FiRe, that there are unique characteristics. And so there will be some variation of what is a good result or what is ideal based upon our individual makeups as well of what's going on. Sri, you had some thoughts early as well.
This is an amazing challenge, and I think in some ways Mark has deliberately made it so complicated that it cannot be fully solved, but the attempt has to be made. If you look at the Indian system of medicine, Ayurveda, it says you are what you eat. Then you look at the omnivore's dilemma, where the author says, eat food, mostly plants, but not too much, right? And then you say, well, do I know what I'm eating? And certainly if you buy a cereal box from the store, etc., they've got 30-some ingredients, and you say, pretty soon I don't know what the compounds that they're saying actually mean, right? So I believe it's food and I eat it. So at the first instance, when Mark in the correspondence said, well, there is information available, but I want you to think about restaurants which make food. How do you know what's in those in the plates that you get served there, or even what you cook at home? So don't stay at the superficial, go deeper to what the micronutrients, etc. are. So this challenge is much more than, how much fat am I consuming, etc., to the microchemicals. So I think it's a complex challenge. At the same time, I think if we don't understand what we are eating, then we face the consequences of that ignorance. And I think this challenge gets us to see whether technology, both the new kinds of things that are coming out in terms of probing doing instant chemical analysis, lab on a chip, etc. At the same time, technologies that surface those conclusions through smart applications that you can then become knowledgeable. I'm about to eat something. Is this good for me or not good for me? We'll see at the end of 2 days whether we are able to reach a level better than where we are today.
Phil?
Well, I'd just add a slightly different wrinkle. I listened this morning to the discussion about the current GDP cost of about 17%, possibly going to 23%. And that's a devastating thing on the American economy. And then I also watched with great interest last year the quantitative self, and have talked a lot to Larry over the past year. I bought that little meter to wear, and
me too.
And encouraged people in our office to have a competition counting steps to get them sensitive to what we were doing. And so I think it's fascinating that we're going to be able to look at the inputs and outputs. But I'm also mindful that if we don't have something very simple,
That's right.
it'll fail in this
right.
society. 30 labels on a box. I tried to use this and figure out the
the
food,
body
and it was
media,
impossible. And so I think that whatever we do, I think the researchers getting to know the biochemistry very well is just terrific. Somehow I hope we can come up with some simple metrics with incentives that'll encourage the society to behave differently as they lead their lives and help their children.
That's right. I think the body media device, I know there's a number of people that did that in the ZO, they had the sleep, and just to start understanding the quantitative self. What does it really mean to live a life like that and start understanding what our bodies are doing? And it's not invasive, but it is something that's on you all the time, that this is about what you're doing. And I think it worked very, very well if you're walking. As a cyclist, it didn't particularly work so well for me because it was confused when I was biking because my legs are moving. Yeah, and we even talked and said, no, it has to be on your shoulders. So we have some technology challenges yet ahead. But that process of becoming aware, I think is a very practical first step of understanding what are the challenges we face to solve this, and practically speaking, what are real people, everyday people, willing to do in their lives to understand their health and nutrition. And I think the comment from both Jerry and Eric, I think are very, very acute. It needs to be fun. It needs to be informative. It needs to be something you want to participate in. I think that's one of the real challenges as well, is surfacing up some of this very technical detail in a consumable way. Yeah. At the same time making it fun and educational so that people want to participate. And they may do things like is challenging each other to better fitness levels or better nutritional levels, however that gets surfaced. Thoughts?
Thoughts, yes, for me. Well, I was in New York when I got the email, so I had a couple of thoughts right away. The first one is I put down this huge piece of pizza that I was about to eat. And
pepperoni or?
There's this Italian place on Bleecker. I just put it down because, being reminded of what you're eating is actually...
cheese and all,
And then the second thought was that, this is interesting because it's multifaceted. I don't think there's one solution. And I think we have a lot of the technologies and a lot of the pieces and a lot of the knowledge, at our fingertips. So it's actually something that can produce a series of results in the years to come. You could probably check back on this next year, the year after, et cetera. And I only answered one of the emails because you guys were much more prolific than me, but I think we could actually produce something pretty constructive in a couple of days, and I think it's something you can build on in the future. There's a simple solution. There's a much more complex solution. I think Larry's in a class by himself because he analyzes his SNPs, his single nucleotide polymorphisms. I don't think that's within reach of most people, but there are many ways to attack the problem. So I like the fact that it's multifaceted. I think we can do something constructive, and I think we will resolve it. Yes.
Oh, good.
This is also close to your area of some of your other areas of interest, as we discussed at lunch as well.
Yes. I study the outputs. I think David said we look at blood, and we look at mutations in blood, which of course are the result of this type of input.
So I think some of that experience will actually lend well to the panel as we put forth this challenge, and we face the music as it will be this afternoon, and of course with the participation of the members of FiRe as well. As one of the breakout sessions, we'll be carrying this discussion and bringing the ideas forth and showing the progress of the team as we gather all the ideas and discuss what the options are, so that those of you who have participated in FiRe before know that the CTO Design Challenge has, during the afternoon, a breakout session where we actually put a lot of the problems and some of the early thinking up on the board and allow others to, have an open dialogue bring all the ideas together about what we can do, and then we kind of go off on the side and crank through the data and get an initial feedback, and then that's kind of reported out at the end of the next day as we prepare to do our report out to you on Friday.
I'm going to be a tough judge, let me just tell you that.
It's really important to remember that the original design of the CTO Challenge and all the way through, it's always been folks out there, including first-timers, who've joined the breakouts and become passionately involved. And sometimes they're really invited up on stage at the end because they were crucial.
Right.
So I'd like to make an editorial comment. It's actually tragedy of modern society that this question was proposed, because as I was sitting here, we know for 500,000 years, hunters and gatherers didn't have a problem. They had taste buds. Every now and then somebody would eat something poisonous and gone, and so the next guy says, I better not eat that. Well, what's happened to us since World War II at least, is that there's phony baloney stuff out there.
Yeah.
Right.
And our taste buds aren't good enough to take care of that problem, so we're going to have something else to analyze the crud that's going into our bodies.
Yeah, and then there's been, and to some extent, the price that we pay for refined foods has been subsidized. So the real costs aren't what it takes to manufacture that or to actually grow that. So the true costs aren't represented. So what is not necessarily nutritional for you, we're an obese society that's nutritionally starving, is basically what's happening here. And so how to turn that in a real world society, I mean, this all comes home to us. I mean, as the doctors say, as we age, you start, and we're all looking at diabetes or cancer or these other type of things. So this is the time, particularly for me anyway, in life to say, okay, how am I going to break that cycle and what am I willing to commit to? And then what information do I have available to help me get there, right? Where is that information? And so that's why the timeliness of this, because I think, as you said, Larry, set the stage with that, of the challenge that he's discovered in the quantified self. This takes it to the next level of how do we open the doors so that everyone has that opportunity to understand. We know that exercise is good for us, but what we put in our bodies, we're still in the dark.
And I want to encourage you to think on the micro scale that, this is not about gross fat measurement. This is about, for the first time, really knowing exactly what are those chemicals either in your food or as they come into your body, what do they become? Because that's where the science is going to happen. And we heard Craig Bender last night talking about the back end of this. Science is ready for this. And we've got a lot of people around the world ready for this information if you could find a way to get it to them. And although certainly obesity and there are other big problems that are kind of the Coca-Cola problems.
Right.
But I'll also emphasize the medical part of this because, may I tell a quick story?
Yeah, we have time.
I had a friend who was in a car crash, head-on car crash, and very, very dramatic, bad thing. Head injury, lost sight in one eye, came to me and couldn't sleep. And the doctor said, well, we're going to just watch your eye. You have some brain damage from this, and it may never come back. We'll know within a couple of weeks, probably. 2 weeks go by, nothing happens. And being an idiot, and being a biochemistry student or whatever, I said, well, let's just take a look. And he said, I can't sleep. It turned out there was a biochemical pathway that was shared between repairing brain tissue and the amino acids necessary for that and sleep. And tryptophan was right in the middle. I said, maybe you should have tryptophan in your food at a higher amount so that your brain can repair itself. And probably this is a hint that the fact you can't sleep is robbing from your sleep requirement for the same thing. It's a melatonin precursor. So that was easy. I mean, you can look up anywhere you want to that there's food with more tryptophan. He did that.
Yeah, turkey or whatever, yeah.
He got his sight back in 2 more weeks and he slept the next night. Now, why didn't his doctor tell him that?
Right. And that the doctors fundamentally aren't trained in that. I mean, that's the scary part of the real reality is that our doctors are not trained necessarily in nutrition, in the areas of nutrition. And so we can ask them, but they don't know.
I'll tell you one more just to be totally inspirational. A family member of ours on my wife's side had a doctor, and suddenly she's dying. She was very good health, and suddenly, 2 days later, she's dying. She's on her death, really, literally, can't even speak anymore. And he's preparing the family for her demise. And she's in her 70s, so it's time to start thinking about letting her go. And I thought, well, wait a minute. I just talked to her 2 days ago. So I kind of took the PDR and I said, can we just have what pill she was on and what. It turned out that 2 weeks earlier, that doctor had given her antibiotics for a cold. It turned out she was on a bunch of things, different chemicals. As Craig talked about last night, we have twice as many bacterial cells in our body as we have human cells. Well, the doctor hadn't thought about that. When he killed off all of her biotic bacteria in her gut, it had the effect, what's called the effective dose of those drugs she was taking doubled.
Oh.
Because the bacteria had been eating them.
Right.
Well, now there's no bacteria. So without him knowing it, he had just doubled the dose of all of her prescription drugs. And guess what? There were some that had an interaction that he hadn't detected. And I made a little chart, and I said, I think this is a very simple problem. And his answer was, no, do you really want to interrupt this process at this time when she's had her good days? And the family goes, yes. Yeah. So they put her on the ferry, sent her to some other doctor, and he goes, well, let's just try it. This makes sense. They pulled her off everything, right? 2 days later, she was fine. She lived for 10 more years. So there's a job to do here. Medicine needs to know. And it's not just your human cells that you want, you're looking at. You're looking at all of our little buddies in the biota of our gut, who also symbiotically create what they're creating for us that allow us to be human beings.
And map it out. Very good. Are we ready for the challenge?
Yes.
Ready?
It's a good one.
We'll see you guys on Friday.
All right, excellent.
Very good.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
got to be fun.
Yes, sir.
All right, that's good.
Good.